Hey everybody, welcome to the Former Athlete Society Continuing Education series. As always, I'm Adam Ringler and I'm hosting this, and I'm trying to bring you some information that might help enhance your former athlete self. So this is a lot of the material that I often share to our current athletes. This is something is really sort of a passion project of me, in that I think that all athletes, regardless if you are a current athlete or if you're a former athlete, we should have learned these things. These are things that comprise just your body, fueling, applied sports psychology, recovery, training. All of these things likely should have been taught to you by a strength conditioning professional, by a registered dietitian, by a licensed clinical or sports psychologist, or an athletic trainer, whatever it might be, right? But in the event that your university did not cover some of this material, I'm trying to bring some actionable information that you can actually apply to your practice so that you can leverage these skills, the habits, and these behaviors. So, as always, I try to do this at least once a month, but sometimes we do it a little bit more often just based on our community and the feedback that we get from the Former Athlete Society. So that said, I think we'll jump into our presentation, right? So if you're unfamiliar with sort of this performance wheel, right? This is essentially how I operate this material. We cover fueling, body, mentality, recovery, training, and we'll be adding leadership into the mix here really soon, just to have this holistic, student-athlete centered model in which we can operate from. This is sort of the framework that I use to try to share some of this information with our athletes, and it's where we'll operate moving forward into this discussion. So let's jump into the fueling section, right? So if you were a current athlete, I would share this material with you every single day. And we work through this performance wheel, if you will, covering topics from fueling, body, mentality, recovery. So it's not just a heavy hitting just on fueling, just on your body, just on your mentality. It's holistic in that we cover everything at least once a week. Now, in this, I wanted to lead off with 3 for 3. And what 3 for 3 means from a performance university standpoint is really trying to get all 3 macronutrients every single meal, and really aiming to have 3 meals across your day, right? If you wanted to go 3 by 3 by 3, then I would also say trying to include 3 small snacks just to help regulate your blood sugar and keep things stable. So the science behind it, what are we actually aiming to do? So we're trying to, after breakfast, eat smaller, more balanced meals more frequently. We're also, in addition to it, why we want to do this is because that frequent feeding and nutrients coming into our body, that helps control for appetite, it helps regulate your blood sugar levels, it supports your muscle growth and your recovery, it improves your focus, helps eliminate sort of mood swings or fluctuations with energy balance, if you will, caused by blood sugar crashes, things like that. We prevent overeating, and it typically reduces that extreme hunger. So the analogy I often use with our athletes, and I love sharing this analogy because I think it's really important, and it's something so visual that a lot of people can see, is that rather than just, if you've ever been camping, right, and you're sitting by the campfire, and when we first introduced camping to my own children, they wanted to do this. They wanted to go out and seek out the biggest log that they could find and throw it on the campfire, right? And the problem with that is that gigantic log is just impossible for the fire to consume, to use as fuel. It sits there and it kind of really just smothers the fire, right? And that's a little bit like our metabolism, right? In some way, that one gigantic meal kind of just sits there and it doesn't get utilized in the same fashion that if you were to throw smaller sticks or kindling more frequently on the fire, that fire stays roaring hot. It stays sizzling, it's going. And that's the 3 by 3 philosophy, in that we should be trying to get 3 square meals right? Maybe breakfast, lunch, and dinner, with somewhere in the vicinity of 3 snacks, smaller meals, periodically throughout the day that include all 3 macronutrients, protein, fats, and carbohydrates, right? And when we do that, right, we can think of it as keeping your fuel tank somewhat full. It's not completely full where you're riding around town or driving around town with a full tank, but neither is it completely empty. We always have fuel in our body to be able to utilize for whatever activities that we're trying to perform or we're trying to do, right? So some other benefits of the 3x3 is not only does it control for appetite, right? And you typically avoid overeating by fueling consistently, right? You have this affinity because of the positive nitrogen balance in our body from the amino acids and the proteins that regular protein intake supports muscle repair and growth in the system. And we want that, certainly. In addition, because of the constant steady blood glucose, right, powering the brain, aiding focus, right, throughout your workday, you have improved concentration, and that's a positive alone, right? This is another graphic I love to share, and this is the idea of just when you have more frequent feedings, you can see in the upper of the screen that we typically will have more stable blood sugar throughout the day, right? It hovers in between those faint gray lines. But when we only have 1 to 2 big meals throughout the day, what ends up happening is that we have this wild fluctuation, peaks and troughs of our blood sugar rising, coming to the top of things, and then falling dramatically right there afterwards. And that is neither good. Another thing in this, right, and I love this sort of like hangry play on the Snicker bar, if you will, is that the performance benefits for 3x3 is that we're never really that hangry because you keep your energy steady all day. We've all been there before, right? I'm not innocent in this fashion, right? We miss a meal for whatever reason, and then for whatever reason we are lashing out coworkers or friends or family. Like, it's not great. It's just like, hey, I'm hungry. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about, the words that I said. I was a little rash in that conversation. I was just really hungry, right? So avoiding that is a win for everybody, including the people within your close proximity, right? So frequent, balanced meals keep your mind and body in sync for peak performance. And who doesn't want that, right? So how do you apply the 3x3, right? So every meal or snack should include some type of carbohydrate, protein, and fat, right? So upper right-hand side of the screen, we have proteins. That's your meats, that's your dairies, that's your cheeses, in some respects, nuts, right? Your carbohydrates in the middle right side of the screen, right? Those would be your grains, right? And fruits and vegetables, starchy vegetables. And then obviously you have your healthy fats, things like salmon, omega-3s, olive oils, guacamole or avocados, some nuts, things like that, right? Right? We should be aiming for those every 3 to 4 hours of the day after your breakfast. And why it works is that you combine those macronutrients to stabilize your blood glucose instead of creating these peaks and valleys that rise and drop, right? So one of the things I often recommend to every athlete that I work with is simply this. We should be getting a lunch pail or lunch box, if you will. I have my own. I didn't actually bring it today. Wow, I was going to show you guys my own lunchbox, right? But it's this exact one. I love this Yeti day trip lunch pail. And I often recommend bringing this because it allows you just simply to plan ahead. You can pack snacks and stick to the rule of 3x3s, and that is a win every single time that you do that. You set yourself up for success. Now shifting gears, and this is kind of a tougher topic to dive into because it's somewhat complex in some ways, and that is talking about the tires of the body, right? The tires meaning the feet, right? Strong feet, strong foundation. This is a micro lesson I shared with our women's basketball team, but resilient feet for performance and injury prevention. This is something that we often see with runners. So if you're a big, 10K, half marathon type runner, you might be dealing with some level of plantar fasciitis, you might be dealing with Achilles pain, you might be dealing just with various ailments throughout our lower limb and body, right? So the foundations of performance, I often share this, is the foot, right? The foot is so critical. Contains 26 bones, 33 different joints, and over 100 different muscles, ligaments, and tendons, right? And basketball, or any really sport demands, but particularly in this example, is all about basketball, demands quick sprints, lateral cuts, repeated jumping. All of that requires strong, stable feet. So what do we need to do? We need strong, stable feet. So strong intrinsic foot muscles provide stability during sudden changes of directions, right? That also helps improve landing mechanics. It reduces the risk of injuries, ankle sprains, and it helps support the arch of the foot and the ankle joint, right? So this is just a model. We'll let this play for a moment here, looking at the complexities of that ankle. What a fascinating area of the body, right? We'll go through it one more time. Fascia, cool, right? So what I share is this, right? You got to think of your feet as the foundation of a house, right? You don't start by building a house where you build the walls before you lay the concrete and the foundation. You build the foundation first, and then you build the infrastructure to the home, right? And that leads oftentimes to better performance and resilience. So from here, the role of the ankle and the whole foot complex in basketball or multi-directional sport, dynamic movements necessitate dynamic strength. And the foot and the ankle complex absorbs and redistributes force with every single step, jump, and landing. So what happens when we have weak foot muscles? We increase the risk of rolling or spraining an ankle, leads to compensation higher up in the kinetic chain, so things like your knees and your hips and your low back. But ultimately, a stronger base allows players to transfer power more effectively into explosive movements like jumping and cutting. And how important is jumping and cutting when it comes to an explosive multi-directional sport? I can tell you it is absolutely critical. Now, from there, I love this graphic as far as this Lamborghini, right? It's a Lamborghini with a flat tire. It doesn't matter how explosive the engine is, right? How many horsepower, right, the engine is. If you have a flat tire, you're still not going anywhere. So we could build this athletic engine, if you will, but if an athlete succumbs to a lower foot injury, right, it doesn't mean that you can move. It doesn't mean that you can go. So all of that work is somewhat for nil, right? So you can have the most powerful engine, but if your tires are flat, you're not going anywhere, right? So a couple of tools that we end up utilizing quite frequently. I love the slack block. Kelly Starrett from Mobility WOD turned me on to this slack block years ago. But again, it's just a balance. It's like standing on a slack line, except you can travel with it. We travel in my basketball kit when we go on the road. It targets the intrinsic muscles by creating instability for the foot to counteract. It improves balance and neuromuscular control. You could use a Dyna disc. So that's like a inflatable disc that you could stand on. LeBron James was maybe popularized it within the last couple years, but we've been using them ever since I was a graduate assistant at Michigan State, right? And it helps athletes, again, practice stability under simulated instability, right? In addition to this, right, why does this matter? Well, performance benefits, enhancements, better lateral quickness and cutting ability, improved jumping mechanics and force transfer when the ankle can be stiff and can be utilize the stability that it has. There's an injury prevention component to everything, where the stronger the intrinsic muscles are, they support the arch in the ankle, which then reduces strain during sudden movements. So it helps reduce the likelihood of injuries there. But most importantly, when it comes to an athlete's ability, their number one most important ability as an athlete is their availability, right? So longevity in the sport really matters. And that's where healthy feet and ankles oftentimes mean fewer overuse injuries and longer, more consistent seasons, right? Every single coach across the country would want a consistent lineup night after night after night, right? So, shifting from the body to mentality, right? This applied sports psychology. I love talking about this because what happens neck down to the human body is really important for performance. Arguably, it's super important. But what happens neck up, that mentality, that psychology, that is so critically important to an athlete's outcome and what they do on the basketball court or the soccer pitch or anywhere else. So, I absolutely love this Dr. Ceri Evans book, right? So again, he's the psychologist for the New Zealand All Blacks. Again, if you're unfamiliar with the All Blacks, they are literally the most winning organization ever in sports, right? So I'm going to butcher this, but I'm using it to sort of highlight maybe how winning they are, right? I felt like I heard this, so I'm butchering it for sure, but it's something to the tune of like 80% of the matches that they faced, they've won. That's how dominant the New Zealand All Blacks are and were in rugby, right? So he is the applied sports psychologist that works with the New Zealand All Blacks. But more importantly, he wrote this book. And this book is Perform Under Pressure. It is chocked full of really, really actionable material that you could apply. So I always recommend our coaching staff and anybody that interfaces with our student athletes to go out, read this book, because it will give you a framework in which you can operate as a coach, as a practitioner, as a whatever. So we're probably all familiar with this, right? So you have, this was back when LeBron was on the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I believe this was it in the semifinals or in the finals? But nonetheless, when something goes astray and you don't get the outcome in which you want, say a play broke up and you were expecting somebody to cut when they were supposed to whatever, right? How do you respond? Do you respond like this, where you're frustrated and you're emotional and you're redheaded and you're hot and you're lashing out at a teammate? Or is there a better way to respond? So in this, I've talked about, and Dr. Ceri Evans talks about this red mind versus blue mind and how we can sort of try to recognize when we're red-minded versus blue-minded and what we can do to shift from red to blue, from hot to cold. So as a recap, red mind just typically means overwhelmed, emotional, and reactive. And blue mind is calm, focused, and intentional. And recognizing the frustration and the pressure can oftentimes push you into that red mind. And what Dr. Ceri Evans talks about, and he goes on chapter after chapter talking about how to actually pause, how to reset, and how to take control of your focus. Now, we can do those strategies to help shift us from that red-minded, that hot emotional state, to a blue mind. And he often recommends taking a deep breath, trying to recenter yourself in the present moment, and then try to focus on what you can control in the very next moment. So, how do we actually apply this in practice? Well, we can really shift to that micro focus, one thing at a time. Break your attention up into small, more manageable steps. This sounds a little bit like the lesson I shared regarding James Clear's Atomic Habits book that I've shared on this channel before. But focus on this moment, this drill, this possession, not the entirety of the game, not the entirety of the basketball season, right? And this is what I shared, right? I've talked about the Atomic Habits by James Clear, how one large goal can oftentimes be broken up into two smaller or maybe 4 micros. And then that makes it a little bit more easy to work through and to make progression on, right? We can oftentimes think about visualizing success. So picturing yourself executing under pressure, right? Those mental reps help build confidence before the actual moment arrives. And that's so critically important, right? So visualizing what you would be doing in that moment, how it feels, where your teammates are, what the coach is saying, what the stands are yelling at in the moment can make it a little bit more real as well. So I've shared this with our basketball team this last season, but you could apply it in whatever way that you want. But when you're waiting to go and your name is going to be called, right, whether it's player introductions, have you taken a moment in this picture to visualize what it's going to be like the first possession, when you're out there, when your team, when you're ready for the jump ball? Have you pictured what it felt like when things go astray, when things don't go right, when you turn the ball over, when a shot doesn't fall, right? All of those things, you can start to put yourself in those positions before you actually encounter them. So what are you visualizing during those moments, right? How can you apply visualization to your practice so that you position yourself to be more successful during those practices, right? And the lastly that I've shared is that we have to trust our preparation. So shifting from worrying about the results to trusting that you put in the work. And I share this work or this mantra all the time. I've done the work, now I execute. I've done the work, now I execute. So this was a picture of us during preseason, this summer workouts, believe it or not, right? So in this lesson, if you will, right, in this micro lesson, I loved sharing this because it was during the beginning of the year, and then I think this lesson happened or occurred during the end of it. So trusting your preparation, trusting your work. Every one of them have been preparing for this moment. You just have to actually trust your preparation. That's so critically important, right? So shifting gears from that to where we're moving on, recovery, right? From mentality to the recovery piece. And this is where the use of contrast showers can come in. So how do I leverage something that we all have access to, running water typically, and utilizing the contrast showers to help enhance my recovery? So we can alternate between hot and cold water during a shower. I got this back when Athletes Performance was still around. They're now Exos. And the mechanism to how this actually improves your recovery is the cold water sort of positions your body to go through vasoconstriction. And then the hot water stimulates vasodilation, which promotes nutrient delivery and tissue relaxation. And alternating between those cycles boosts circulation and reduces the stiffness. Because as you can imagine, when your body is hot, you're flushing or pushing, you go through that vasodilation, that hot, warm blood goes closer to the surface of your body because it's trying to move away from your vital organs, i.e. so your vital organs don't get warm and overheat. So it pushes the blood more towards the surface of the body. And then when you shift it to cold water, now that blood is going closer to your organs to protect it, because it wants to bring the warm blood closer to your vital organs. Everything's about vital organs and protecting your body to survive. Essentially, that's what we are, surviving organisms. So it forces that warm blood closer to the organs. And forcing that blood to go to your peripheral system, to the surface of your body, and then more inward to our body, that creates a flushing-like effect. So we can leverage the temperature of water to end up having this vasodilation, vasoconstriction, blood flow in and out of our body to end up promoting this recovery-like effect. So I often say 3 to 4 cycles of hot water for 1 to 2 minutes, followed by cold water for a minute. So if you would like to go a minute by a minute or 2 minutes hot, 1 minute cold, but 3 to 4 cycles through all of that, and then ending on the cold water to maximize the anti-inflammatory effect, right? Now, in addition to that, what does this actually do, right? So again, it improves your mobility, it improves your blood flow, reduces muscle fatigue, and it's convenient for athletes who lack access to an ice bath. So this is a fantastic way of actually getting some level of recovery done in a hotel that doesn't have access to cold tubs or hot and cold tubs, when you're traveling, at your apartment, at your dorm, anywhere where you have running water and a shower, which is almost everywhere here in America, right? The last lesson I want to kind of touch on this sort of continuing education, former athlete society lecture, YouTube lecture here, is about heart rate recovery. So this is something we look at quite frequently here in sport. It might be something that you, if you wear a Garmin watch or an Apple Watch, I believe I see it in my Apple Health app and Apple Fitness app. And it's a key metric for understanding your fitness and your fatigue levels, right? The state of your autonomic nervous system. So heart rate reserve or heart rate recovery measures how quickly your heart rate decreases after intense exercise. So it reflects your ability to transition from a heightened state of exertion to a resting state. And in sport, this really matters because a faster recovery time often correlates with better performance and overall readiness, right? So in this graphic alone, you can see the athlete's max heart rate's at 193. This particular athlete got to 168. In 30 seconds, they recovered to 146. So the math is simply 168 minus 146, that's 22 beats per minute in a 30-second recovery period. So you could see how that 22 beats divided by your max heart rate is an 11.4% recovery rate. And that's okay, there it is. Now, I pulled this, and I wanted to share this with our athletes just to put it in more contextual forms, is that 30 or higher, that's a pretty decent, that's a good recovery rate. A 20 to 29, beats per minute, okay, that's good. 14 to 19, that's all you recovered, right? And 12, 13, you can read the charts, right? So why this is really important is because we wanted to make sure that our athletes are recovering from bouts. So because we end up utilizing First Beat as our internal load monitoring technology, and I end up looking at sort of our heart rate responses. And you could see that the average 60-second heart rate recovery was 58, right? And this Friday, the 27th. So, okay, on average, our team is doing a really good job at recovering within a minute recovery, and because we're finding that our beats per minute was a 58 recovery. So, in addition to that, that's an indicator of cardiovascular fitness. A faster HRR shows a more efficient cardiovascular system. When an athlete's fit, their heart doesn't need to work as hard to pump blood, and it returns to resting levels very quickly after exercise. So why would something like this matter in sport? Well, athletes with a better cardiovascular fitness can sustain higher efforts longer. We know that. That's just physical fitness. That's what you would want from any athlete performing for you, is just a greater capacity for aerobic or anaerobic fitness. They also typically recover faster between plays or sprints or sets, allowing them to maintain their performance throughout a game, through a practice. So imagine you have two athletes and they go out and you call a timeout, and one athlete recovers 60 beats per minute, and then they go out on the court and their heart rate is now at 120 beats per minute or 110 beats per minute. And this athlete only recovers 20 beats per minute, and their heart rate is now at 150. You have one athlete at 110, you have another athlete at 150 beats per minute. How much effort can this athlete sustain before he or she meets her max heart rate? This athlete, however, have so much more bandwidth to be able to reach his or her max heart rate. And so that's why heart rate recovery matters so much in these intermittent sports, because everybody has the same amount to recover. If it's a 30-second timeout, they all have the same amount of time that they can recover and rest. But the athlete that has a greater amount of heart rate recovery, or a faster heart rate recovery rate, they will recover more in that 30 seconds, and they will have a greater runway to be able to push themselves for on the next basketball possession or the next effort. In addition to it, it's a sign of your autonomic nervous system. So HRR is influenced by the balance between your sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest. So a quick recovery rate means that the parasympathetic nervous system is kicking in to efficiently slow that heart rate. And so that matters in basketball, it matters in these intermittent sports, because athletes who can recover quickly from stress are more likely to be physically and mentally prepared for the next challenge. A slow heart rate response, heart rate recovery, can indicate overtraining, fatigue, and illness, right? And there's such incredible papers, such incredible papers that all share that same finding, right? So in this one right here alone, heart rate recovery in 10 seconds correlated with the playing time percentage spent in sprinting. Heart rate recovery in 60 seconds and a yo-yo intermittent recovery test both correlated with the playing time spent in running, right? So why this is important is simply because your recovery between efforts, like basketball, are typically repetitive, high-speed, high-intensity efforts, followed by short rest periods. And so that HRR determines how effectively you can recover between those efforts and during those rest intervals. And so it matters in basketball simply because a faster recovery equals more sustained performance over time. A poor heart rate recovery will see performance drop-offs as the game progresses, right? And a coach can easily track heart rate recovery to know if an athlete is fatigued or needs more recovery. So hopefully in this that we've taken something away from all of these slides, right? And this is my attempt of trying to share some really quality information related to all of these things, right? So just jumping over, we touched on fueling, we talked about your body, we talked about applied sports psychology, we discussed sort of contrast showers for recovery, right? And we talked about why monitoring and tracking your heart rate recovery is important. All of these things are things I try to share with our team that I work with currently, right here. But these are lessons that maybe a strength coach, maybe your sports scientist, maybe your athletic trainer, maybe your registered dietitian or sports psychologist should have taught, right? And if not, then these are great resources for you. And those are great professionals to reach out to learn more about these things. But for many of us, now that we've exhausted our eligibility here in the former athlete society, that you don't have an RD to work with. You don't have a psychologist that you talk with every day or at practice or during games. You don't have an athletic trainer. You might have a personal trainer, but I don't know if you have a holistic coach that talks about all of these things. And so that's why I created this former athlete society, to try to take lessons like this, apply it in a very simplistic form, and deliver it back to you. So if you took anything away from this, and I hope you did, I certainly hope something in this has resonated with you, then I invite you to join our former athlete society, right? You can find out more information at my website, adamringler.com. There's links all up top that you can navigate to. You can join, right? And it almost costs nothing, right? And in it, you'll get access to the one-on-one calls, right? I host an accountability call every Tuesday. And every Tuesday, I host a Zoom link. You can jump on and we talk about the goals and things we want to accomplish during our training week. I host it every single Tuesday so that we can hold each other accountable to attacking what we want to attack. In addition, every Thursday, I host a Q&A call. You bring the questions and I'll answer them live on the spot with you. If you can't make the call, you can access our entire collection of past calls, but you can also email me those questions at my website, and you could drop them in there as well. And then you get access to materials like this, our masterclasses, where we dive in deep, discussing this very thing right here, right? Fueling, body, mentality, recovery, training, leadership, how to apply all of these things to areas of your life so you can get better, right? So as always, if any of this resonated, I want to hear more about what you took away in the comments below, and you could leave me a comment. I'll reply. I'll share some things. Subscribe to this channel, right? If you're watching this right now, subscribe so that you can get all of the access to the videos in real time, pushed right directly to your phone. And then I implore you to go over to adamringler.com, sign up today. You'll get all access to all the articles. There's a paid site. You'll get access to that. Check it out, adamringler.com. As always, thank you for tuning into this. I appreciate each and every one of you showing up and giving me your time, your attention, your focus. I don't take it lightly. There's hundreds and thousands and millions of channels and videos you can watch, and you chose to watch this one. So thank you. And until next time, keep attacking it, keep getting strong, staying healthy, and I'll see you next video.